Hello everyone, and welcome for those that I haven't had the chance to meet. My name is Cody Semrau, and I'm the founder and CEO of BetterMynd, which is an online therapy platform for college students. I grew up in Rochester, New York, um, which is a few hours down the road from where I live now, in Buffalo, where I live with my partner John and our 14-year-old Westie Max. I don't know if anybody's excited for the NFL, but hopefully we have a few Bills fans out there. And I'm really excited for all of you to join us today for our second Beyond Titles conversation. We launched this series really to go beyond the resumes and accolades and get to know the people behind the leadership titles in higher ed. So these are really supposed to be, honest, human first conversations. And our theme today, Leading from Within, feels especially timely given the challenges that higher ed is facing. So we'll be talking about resilience, building authentic partnerships, and protecting the well-being of ourselves when burnout is everywhere. So my hope is that you walk away today with both practical insights and a renewed sense of energy for the work that you all do. Alex, thank you. And so, for anyone who is new to Better Minds or unaware of what we do, we are an online therapy platform, and we partner with colleges and universities across the country to support the mental health of their students, which is, an issue that's been continuing to challenge, universities. And the number two reason that students take a break or stop out altogether when it comes to their higher education. And ultimately, this work is personal to me as a college student. I struggled with anxiety and depression to the point where I started to question, my own will to live. My campus was fortunate to have a counseling center, but the fear and stigma that kept me from getting help, for months until I really hit rock bottom. So, it was an experience, ultimately that made me realize how many students are facing similar challenges and obstacles to getting the support they need to succeed, both personally and academically. But today's title, Beyond Titles really isn't about me or Better Mind. It's about ultimately shining a light on the leaders who inspire us to think bigger, lead with purpose, and to put people first. So if we jump to the next slide, Alex, we thank you. That brings us to our esteemed guest today, Dr. Antonio McLaren. Antonio is the Vice President for Program Innovation and Implementation at the 1890 University's Foundation, where he leads high impact initiative across the nation's 1890 land grant institutions. And with over 22 years of federal service at the USDA, including national leadership of a $180 million 1890 programs portfolio. He's dedicated to his career to expanding opportunities, building partnerships, and driving student success. So, Antonio, welcome. It's an absolute pleasure, absolute privilege to have you today. And maybe you could just start by saying hello to our guests and sharing a bit about your journey.
Sure, absolutely. I'd be glad to do so, Cody. Thank you so much. First of all, to you, Cody, Alex, Elise, the entire BetterMynd team for hosting this dialogue this afternoon. And for some of you, it might be morning. And I'd love to share just a little bit about who I am and the work that I'm doing. So, Antonio McLaren, I serve as the Vice President of Programs at the 1890 University's Foundation. Grew up most of my life in Northern Virginia, right just outside of Washington, D.C. I am a proud two-time graduate of Virginia State University. And, as was mentioned in the bio, worked for USDA for over 22 years. But currently, I am in the nonprofit space at the 1890 University's Foundation, and I've been in that space for 4.5 years. So I have certainly a profound respect for the work that's being done across the higher education landscape. I've worked with 1890 land grant universities, which are HBCUs, pretty much my entire career. And in that space, I've worked with everyone from presidents of universities all the way, through deans, provosts, research directors, and many others. My favorite group to work with are students. Students are really the heart and soul of my work. So the work that I'm doing now and the work that I've done at USDA was really all about building the future generations of individuals working in the food and scientific professional workforce when it comes to the food and ag sector. And that's been work that I've been really proud of. And I'll end by saying that my entire journey to where I am today really started off when I was 17. I didn't have money to go to college. And I wanted to find a way to get to college without having to burden my parents. And my parents made it very clear that they couldn't pay. It was a scholarship from USDA that provided me that jump start into my career. So I credit USDA and I credit the work of Virginia State University and other higher education institutions for paving the way for students, particularly who might be underserved, and giving an opportunity to a 17-year-old kid like me, the opportunity to be able to uh, get a degree, on a full ride, and pursue a career in the food and ag space. So I'm proud to sit here with all of you across higher education who continue to do the major work of advancing students in your respective spaces. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Cody.
Thank you, Antonio. Well, I guess before we dive into anything too deep, maybe we can start with a lighter note. And I'm curious as folks get to know you if you've picked up any new hobbies or activities of late.
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's not a new hobby. It's sort of something that I've been doing for the last few years, really ever since the pandemic. So in my personal life, I do enjoy giving back to charities financially. And one of the things I've challenged myself to do each and every year is to really diversify my giving portfolio. It's something I really take seriously. And I think that the reason why the pandemic was sort of the impetus to that is in my nonprofit work, um, the communities that my organization works to advance, those communities were really exacerbated as a result of the pandemic. Things like food inaccessibility, food insecurity got worse. So in my personal space, what I like to do is figure out ways that I can give back in tangible ways financially. I might not be able to serve physically, but I can certainly give back financially. So that's something I've been doing just personally. And I'm so anytime I'm able to sort of look across the organizations that I support, I'm able to touch different audiences with the power of giving. So that's something that I really enjoy.
Hmm. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. Well, jumping in here, then I thought we could start off with, talking about really how we ground in purpose in our work. And I know as myself, a leader of a small company, someone who struggled with mental health, it's important to have that guiding principle, something that keeps you grounded when everything else in the world feels a little bit chaotic. So I'm curious, Antonio, when it comes to your leadership philosophy, what is your North Star, your grounding principle that has helped shape your journey, especially, to get to where you are today?
Great question. So I took a moment to reflect in my personal time. So really, my leadership philosophy is built on servant leadership. And what I mean by that is it's really taking the attention off of me as in terms of the personal gain or the authority of leadership. It's really emphasizing serving the people that um, that I'm leading, or whether that's in terms of a team or in terms of my capacity as VP. But it's I want to see people grow. I want to see people develop. I want the best versions of my team members because I believe that an effective organization is one in which it's healthy, that there's healthy communication, that there's transparency, that there's trust. And in order for me to do that, I really have to be intentional in terms of serving the needs of my team members, um, and not celebrating myself. I rather, if my team celebrates me, that's great. But I really want my team to be served by my leadership and not the other way around.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. I love that servant leadership, philosophy. I guess one of the challenges of that is sometimes maybe do you ever feel left behind in that yourself, or how do you personally stay grounded and supporting your own well-being?
Yeah, I'm an introvert. I have to flip a switch to be an extrovert. So I guess that makes me an ambivert. And as an introvert, I do a lot of reflection. I do tons of introspection. Um, and I think in that reflection time, it allows me to sort of recenter myself. Um, and I think, for those of you who are introverts in this space, you might agree, like just even in the day to day, in some cases, you might have a long day of meetings, and maybe especially in higher education, you're interfacing with diverse stakeholders or audiences at any one time. You're wearing multiple hats. Serving students, you're serving faculty and staff, you're maybe meeting with folks in the community. So in my personal time, I have to find ways to unplug, and having boundaries helps to do that. I It's important for me to also have some humility, and not take myself too seriously, because I think as an introvert, I can become over analytical on projects or tasks, and I think I have to ensure that I'm not drowning myself in my own self-evaluation, because I think I'm probably my harshest critic in the work that I do. And so it's really important for me to get centered, whether that's prayer, meditation, quiet time, unplugging, getting away from my phone, getting away from the laptop, and just doing something for me. That self care is so important, particularly in this time in 2025 with everything that's taking place. It is important for all of us to exercise mindfulness so that we can be the best versions of ourselves as leaders.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. Taking care of yourself so you can take care of others, right?
Absolutely.
Well, awesome. Thank you again for sharing that, Antonio. I know you've spoken before about the importance of quiet discipline in leadership, and I'm curious what that looks like for you in practice, and why you believe that it's a powerful tool, especially for higher ed leaders, in today's climate.
Yes. So, as I mentioned, I have profound respect for leaders across higher education. I absolutely love the education space. And, for me, quiet discipline, it looks like a few things. Few things come to mind. So one is active listening and having empathy. And really being intentional when I'm meeting with individuals or groups. It's really trying to understand what are their needs, and um, prioritizing their concerns. And I think part of my role is also to foster an environment where there's that open transparency, that dialogue. I want, this might sound weird to say, but I want my meetings to be a little messy. What I mean by that is I don't think it's productive to avoid conflict. I think it's better, more productive to be assertive and to really have real conversations, about challenges in an open way. I think that leads to a better opportunity to, for a desired outcome. So, you know, environments that I work in or environments that I'm trying to lead, things like microaggressions, like passive aggressiveness, that those are things that I just won't tolerate as a leader. I will not tolerate. And the other thing is, for me, quiet discipline also involves thoughtful decision making. So I want to listen first. I want to gather all the data and information first before I make a decision. I don't like having to be impulsive. Sometimes, I'll be honest, as a human being, I've been in, even this year, in many tough conversations with groups and with different individuals. There's a lot going on across the nonprofit space, and I can react, or I may want to react impulsively or get defensive. But I think it's always better to exercise emotional intelligence and really just continue to come back to that center. Whatever is centering me in that moment, remind myself that it is best to uh, be reflective before responding, because I think that's going to have a more desired outcome in the end, in the long term. And then the last thing I would say is, and I think I mentioned it before, it's empowerment of others before empowering myself.
Hmm.
Um, I want to create spaces where they feel that they can grow, that they can develop and take ownership of the work. I am not a micromanager. I'd rather use, check-ins to just to ensure that things are on track, but I don't believe in hovering. If I hire someone or if someone is on my team, I believe the best productivity comes from a foundation of trust. And and I saw this on LinkedIn, and I think it really rings true for me. The most effective leaders are those that hire smart people to tell them what to do. In other words, the smart people are helping the leaders guide the organization, not the other way around. If I hire someone and I'm bossing them all over the place, and that doesn't really lead to a productive outcome or anything that's really solution oriented, because then I'm sort of cutting them off at the knees. I like when I can have folks on my team that feel empowered to do the job that they've been hired to do.
Hmm. Awesome. Well, thank you. I know, leaders like yourself are frequently juggling conflicting demands and pressures. How do you feel like you stay aligned and consistent, even when there's perhaps pressure to shift away from those core values of yours?
Yeah, that's a great follow up. So for me, it's one thing I didn't mention before. It's the power of community really helps. Um, Quick example, and this is an easy one, and maybe others can identify. Um, During the pandemic, I found myself in a few group chats on my phone with colleagues from different spaces. It could be folks from the federal space, the higher education space. There was so much going on, and certainly I think everyone here might, can identify with not only things happening professionally, but also things happening personally that they had to deal with during the pandemic. The power of community means so much when I can share something, give a testimony, or in return, listen to what someone else is going through, and then me offer insight if I'm asked to do so. And I think in higher education, as leaders, there's so much pressure uh, to be the best or to feel like you have to have all of the answers. And years ago, in my own reflection time, I sort of had to reframe things for me is that as a leader, I don't have to have all the answers. I just have to be intentional about finding the answers. Um, so I so I don't have to always feel when I'm met with a problem that I have to answer it in that very moment. I think what is better is just having the intentionality and being resourceful because I'm not perfect, right? And I don't carry myself in that way to be perfect. It's more about intentionality and moving from that position in order to get the job done. And I think community really helps me to have that opportunity to reflect, bounce ideas back and forth, because just hearing from others helps me to advance in my own leadership space.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, perhaps we can jump to a slightly different topic, but I know, as you've mentioned, Antonio, you bring a rare lens having worked across government, nonprofits, philanthropy, and higher education. And I'm curious if you've seen any recurring patterns or blind spots regarding how institutions approach or perhaps overlook, different strategic plans or long-term alignment.
I have, I have, and certainly um, the one that comes to mind is an unclear or a vague vision. And the way I kind of think about it is it's sort of like not having that destination in mind. Uh, it's very frustrating, I think, for any organization where the team, for example, is not in alignment with what the vision of the leader is. And I think that can affect employee morale adversely. So I kind of look at it like this. If a friend of mine asked me today, hey, take a ride with me, I need to go somewhere, just hop in the car and, come along. And I'm in the car and I'm patient, but he doesn't tell me where he's going. After a while, I'm going to probably get anxious because I want to know after 15 minutes, I have no idea where we're going. 30 minutes passes, an hour passes, and I have no idea where we're going. And I probably want to say, hey, buddy, like, where are we going, by the way? And I think in some cases, there are people, unfortunately, in teams or in organizations that might not know where the leader is going. That can be anxiety inducing. That can affect employee morale. That can affect alignment. That can affect productivity. The leader might know where he or she is going, but does the team understand where the leader is going? So it's that fostering that opportunity for an alignment, and that having that transparency is very significant here. And I think also with that, it's siloed communication and higher education spaces, particularly I think larger universities especially see this, but I think even small universities see this as well, and everyone in between. You have multiple offices. There are departments. You have the academic college. There's administration. There's so many different pockets of teams within the department, teams within the college, and the information flow, how that works from one campus to the next can certainly look different. But I think I've seen spaces, especially working in government, where information is not shared effectively from one office to the next. And that could lead to some frustration. I certainly saw that during the pandemic because just the way what we were working was altogether different. We weren't gathering in spaces, having conversations. Everything was virtual. So it's really incumbent upon the leader to really try to foster those opportunities for dialogue, for open transparency, and to ensure that there's trust. At the end of the day, does your team feel comfortable in having difficult conversations? And if they don't, what can you do to change that? So yeah, I do think that there are reoccurring blind spots. And for leaders that are dealing with those blind spots, I think it's okay. As long as you can identify it and address it, I think it comes back to the intentionality piece because there are going to be blind spots. We can't see everything, but it's all about how do we identify and then address them.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. Thank you. As a follow-up, are there, on the flip side, any models or moments you've seen where this cross-sector alignment across different industries or verticals has actually worked and what perhaps made it possible?
Yeah, so I've had um, the benefit of working, I mentioned working at USDA. I worked in a grant making agency called the National Institute of Agriculture. And in that space, primarily my role was to manage grant programs for universities. So the the relationship with my colleagues, in particular faculty, deans, directors, those relationships were essential for me to get my work done. But the other thing I would say here is at the nonprofit space, first of all, my work at the nonprofit space, again, going on 4.5 years, this is the first time I've ever been in a nonprofit. I have immense respect for nonprofits and the work that they do now. Um, it is nothing like working at the government. There's nothing like it. My day, I think in government, and the example is from one day to the next, maybe not so much now, but when I was there, I could sort of plan out my day. I sort of could see what was coming up at any given moment. In nonprofit space, I can't. There's so much coming at me as in my position because we have to be we have to be aware of what's happening federally. When executive orders come down, for example, how does that affect us as an organization? And then there's also so many things coming from the stakeholders that we work with. We work with universities, we work with private sector organizations as well. So, and one of the main things that we're constantly thinking about, or what keeps me up at night, is sustainability. How do we keep the doors open? Right, and in spaces or in times like this when we're navigating, uh, this era of um, increased scrutiny on federal grant programs, or perhaps donors or private sector organizations maybe are going to be a little tighter in wanting to give to organizations. It's that sort of framework that um, really keeps me up, and it is something that we have a lot of conversations about as a team internally. We have had some successes though. We've had successful partnerships with Microsoft. We had successful partnerships with Walmart, and I'm proud of those where we were able to deliver much needed resources to underserved communities in 1890 university states. Um, but 2025 is looking very different. And right now, my organization, we are in a uncertain phase. We're trying to find a new president. We're trying to navigate this new fundraising reality that we're in. So it's exciting, but nerve wracking all at the same time. So but I am, what again, it comes back to being intentional, really empowering the team, and really understanding that how important that this cross-sectional work is. It's really important for nonprofits, higher education, private sector, government working together to achieve goals that we're aligned in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know you just mentioned a few partnerships and implementing those, but I'm curious, I know these developing these partnerships isn't easy, and especially, authentic relationships where you're both, shooting for similar goals. And I'm curious what's, one or two practical approaches you found essential to building these partnerships that are truly collaborative and not just transactional.
Yeah, it really comes back. I think the first thing is identifying what is that shared vision? What's that compass look like? If we're going to partner with an organization, our values, our mission, is there an alignment that connects our organizations together where it makes sense? Um, I also think that cultural competence is very, very critical. There have been times when I worked at USDA where one of my key roles was, as a program manager, was managing the applications that came in from different institutions. And so I was managing the review panels of these grants. And I can remember in certain review panels noting where the collaboration doesn't seem organic here. Um, and, it shows. I think there's more value when organizations are looking to partner with another organization. It shows when there's an intentionality to understand the culture of each other as well as the stakeholders that we're looking to serve.
Mhm.
And taking, as an example, if I have a project that's been successful at an HBCU, you know, I can't make the assumption that that solution can be easily, replicable at a predominantly white institution. Some things may have to change, and vice versa. Perhaps there are certain things that are implemented or an intervention at a predominantly white institution that maybe can't work at an HBCU or a Hispanic serving institution or a tribal college or university. So we have to understand as leaders cultural competence. We have to ensure that we're being respectful of communities, that we understand the nuances, that we understand what their needs are, and not assume that one intervention or one solution is a one size fits all. So those would be the two things. I think vision, making sure that organizations are aligned on vision, and the second big thing for me is the cultural competence piece.
Hmm. Absolutely. Love that. Thank you, Antonio. Well, perhaps the next topic we can jump to here is how you sustain morale and mission in hard times. Obviously, today, higher ed leaders are facing unprecedented levels of burnout, and I believe that 77%, a recent study showed, of higher ed leaders are experiencing mental health impacts from this burnout. So I'm curious, what you've learned about managing your own energy and well-being, and how you help maintain that morale across an organization.
Absolutely. I would say the biggest thing as individuals that we have to do, we must pay attention to the warning signs before the crash, right? Burnout doesn't happen overnight. I believe burnout happens over a period of time, perhaps that you are working in a hostile work environment, or maybe it's toxic, or however you want to describe it, that there's something happening over a period of time that leads to burnout. And I'm definitely sensitive to individuals across higher education that have felt burnout. There's so many pressures coming at higher education leaders all the time. Faculty, just the promotion and tenure process. There are many things that they deal with daily. But the warning signs, I think, happen first, right? So we have to pay attention to those signs first before the crash. Um, Reflect, take a break. Um, I do sort of have um, mixed feelings about vacation. I think vacation is good, but I also think, for me personally, what happens when I take a vacation, I come back, then I'm overwhelmed with all the work that I missed. So it's kind of how you look at it, but I think you have to figure out ways to really put boundaries in place. Um, and you have to hold yourself to those boundaries. You cannot or should not compromise your boundaries for yourself, because what you're trying to do is ensure that you're being the most effective leader that you can be. Now, when it comes to teams that you're managing for your people, it really, I think the biggest thing is we got to focus on retention, and not recruitment. I think we saw during the pandemic things like quiet quitting, the great resignation, folks quitting their jobs, moving on to something else, right? And as a result, organizations are having to backfill, get contractors in, or do a mixed number of quick solutions to address, the loss of institutional knowledge. We have to focus on retention. We got to be able to keep the people that are great, right? What does that look like? So it's going to look different for every organization. Um, but employee engagement, having performance metrics that make sense, having team connectedness and collaboration, that has to be a part of it. Um, and I also think, I don't mean to offend anyone when I say this, but I think as leaders, including me, we got to stop doing the stupid ice cream socials and the free popcorn in the break room. Have conversations with your team. That's what they want. I don't think the little goodie bags or whatever we do really helps in the long run. It's very short term type, make you feel good, pat you on the back, but it's actually patronizing when you do that. And so foster a healthy work environment. Have those tough conversations. Take the onus off of us to be an authority and really allow your team to keep you accountable. And I said, so I come back to that servant leadership philosophy. We got to serve our team and stop serving ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like a really authentic approach. Well, I guess since we've got a few minutes, maybe I'll give you a bonus question here, Antonio. And when it comes to higher ed, as a whole, I'm curious what's one small change you feel like leaders can make to address, perhaps some of their blind spots.
Yeah. I think one of the things that would help to remove the blind spots. Um, so, from a project management perspective, I think we need to do perhaps a better job of how we plan goals and set goals and objectives. So you have the vision, but you have to go further than that, right? And using whether it's a logic model, which is something that I'm very familiar with, I'm going to make the assumption that many folks across higher education are familiar with. Certainly, a lot of federal grant programs might require logic models as part of the application. So use a logic model that kind of allows you to understand what your inputs are. What are all the sort of the factors that go in to your project, all the resources, but also helps you plan out your short, medium, and long-term goals. And then also those externalities to identify what those are. The political externality, for example, um, understanding maybe there are financial considerations that need to be identified from the front end. So, and also I think the other piece is stakeholder feedback. Um, Not only so your team, yes, you need feedback from them, but also who are your customers? Who are the people that you are serving on a day-to-day basis? What do they think of your organization? Um, are they being served appropriately and adequately? I think sometimes we make assumptions. And I think that's the blind spot. Our blind spot, one of the biggest ones, is our own bias. We wake up every day and we think we're fabulous leaders. How do you know? Um, how often do we look in the mirror and really reflect and ask ourselves tough questions? Do we want to face what we see in the mirror as a leader? Who's holding us accountable in terms of our leadership? The real so the real feedback. So I've seen this happen at USDA millions of times. I know I'm exaggerating, but I go to a meeting. The leader leads the meeting. It's very surface level. It's productive but surface level, right? The real data happens after the meeting is over when me and my colleagues are huddling in someone's office having the real conversation. The leader doesn't get to hear that. So, how can the leader foster that environment to get to that real data, right? That real information. because I think leaders really need to understand how their team really feels about him or her. And additionally, the stakeholders, their target audience, you need to know and understand how they feel. You can't make an assumption just because you're getting a bonus at the end of the year or your performance appraisal is great that you're doing a great job. You can't make that assumption. You have to set up ways in which you are being held accountable and measured by the people that you're leading as well as the people that you're serving.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that. Well, Alex, I'm not sure we can jump into our closing question here, but I'm not sure if we have any questions from the audience or if we want to ask folks for
Yeah, I
some
think there's
questions.
a good enough group where if folks have a question, we can come off mute and ask directly. Um, no, I think we're good to move to our closing question.
Well, I guess, as we close then, Antonio, this is probably follows on a bit with the last question, but is there any one practical insight or takeaway that, you'd want senior campus leaders to walk away with today?
Yeah, I think I've said it um, earlier, but I will emphasize it now. Focus. So coming back to from a service or servant leadership philosophy, focus on the service. Don't worry about the leadership. Just throw out leadership out of your mind. The service to me is the foundation of everything else. The leadership will happen organically, right? Because if you're focused on your organization's mission and vision, the needs of your team, as well as the needs of your stakeholders, your target audience, the service, that's what's going to keep you grounded. That's what's going to keep you intentional and wanting to engage, wanting to foster that environment that's healthy and not hostile. Um, and I'm not making the assumption that you're fostering hostile work environments. So I want to be careful that, to not infer that. That's not what I'm saying, but you might have a hostile work environment and might not even know it. There might be microaggressions going on in your office and you might not even know it. How do you get to that data? How do you gather that information? And it comes back to that intentionality, that service. Um, I know how it feels. I think we've all driven in fog before. Driving when it's foggy is not fun. Can't see where you're going, right? Um, and even though you might know, you might have a destination on your GPS, it's foggy. You don't know where you're going. Your team doesn't know where you're going either if they're following you. So, how do you clear out the fog, even when you have a destination in mind? Ensuring that your team is connected to you as a leader is very, very important. Again, I think I said it earlier, have the messy meetings. If they're just so perfunctory and service level and surface level, I think it just leads to redundancy in operation. Um, Also, stop doing something because that's the way we've always been doing it. I see that in government a lot. It's probably in higher education. If something works very well, keep doing those things. But if there are other things that are duplicative, mundane, and just lacks complete innovation, maybe it's not needed. Um, and I would also, you know, try to foster ways in which um, members of your team can really just engage you. Are there things that you're doing that are an obstacle to them engaging you? that maybe you don't even know that you're doing. If it's in a physical office environment, is your door always closed, or is it open, or is it a little bit of both? How often do you check in with your team? Um, how often do you gather and just have an open meeting with no agenda? I have those. Sometimes the agenda structure is great, but are there things happening in the team that need to be discussed and the agenda can wait? Because you can't get to the agenda if you have all these things percolating that are leading to hostile work environments or tension. Throw out the agenda and have an open meeting. Allow them to just talk to you. I foster that, and because it really helps me understand what's happening in my team. Don't be scared uh, of what you hear from your team. Invite those difficult conversations. Don't always think you know the answer.
Mm.
I don't know everything. I love having teammates with me that have my back and I can lean on them. I'm not the expert. I'm just a spokesperson. I look at myself as just maybe a guide, but we're all in this together. The way I look at it, I sort of function when I think about leadership styles. You hear about authoritative, delegative, participatory. I like the participatory style because it's more of about us taking ownership as a team versus versus it being my way or your way. It's our way, right? So that's another style that I also use. In addition to being a servant, I'm emphasizing that this is our thing at the end of the day. So I would end there.
I do actually have a follow-up question. Someone just sent it to me in the chat, which I think is the perfect way to close this out, Antonio. Essentially higher education is in this transformative moment. We're thinking about enrollment shift to the mental health crisis to the evolving role of AI and technology. If we were to have this conversation in 6 months from now, what would you hope to see change or move forward most in higher education?
Oh, that's a great question. Wow. AI is AI is exciting and scary all at the same time. Um, I think from a tool standpoint, I love how we're able to use AI to automate certain processes that used to be manual. Um, I also think that the way that we collaborate as team members, especially in this era of working, a lot of us probably work. Maybe it's a combination: hybrid, face to face, remote. Uh, the thing that I think we really need to focus on is uh, how do we ensure that if we can't retain the people that are really great for our organizations, then how do we develop processes to acquire the institutional knowledge before a person leaves? One of the things that I'm seeing across many of the institutions that I work with is turnover at all levels. And burnout is a reason, but there are other reasons, right? It could be lack of incentives. It could be pay. It could be, uh, just a better opportunity, came up. So there's a multitude of reasons why people leave and go to another organization. I think what hurts the most, though, is when they leave and all that knowledge leaves with them. I saw that in government. And, I've been in a situation in which the agency I work for was relocated from DC across the country to Kansas City. And a lot of people didn't move, and a lot of institutional knowledge got lost. And it's not easily to replace. You can't replace it overnight just by hiring somebody. Hiring somebody is only putting someone in the slot. But 25, 30 years of knowledge that walks out the door, you can't replace that. So we got to focus on retention. We have to understand what this new era of working is going to look like as we move forward because of technology, and we have to lean into that. I don't think we should shy away from technology. I think we need to understand how do we use it to our benefit and make it a part of our work environments. I think the next generation, I think Generation Z and the next generation after that, Generation Alpha, I think the work environment for them, the type of leaders that they're going to be should be different than the leader that I am. And I think part of the challenge that I'm seeing is that as leaders, sometimes we're not evolving fast enough to catch up with everything else around us. I would love to see, I'll just get an example, 35-year-old deans, 40-year-old college presidents. And I'm not just going to say just because they're younger, but what I'm saying is I want a longer runway for leadership so that we minimize perhaps the rate of turnover. I want to see leadership development programs that allow young people that are early career in higher education maybe skip all the academic steps from assistant professor, associate professor, professor, department chair, assistant dean, dean, provost, president, right? I want a program where you can streamline leaders, young people who have identified themselves as wanting to be leaders in administration. Maybe they identify themselves very early on, and we get them into programs that allow them to do that at an earlier part of their career, and look at maybe some non-traditional ways of leadership development. I would love to see us do that.
Awesome. Well, Antonio, this was great. I really appreciate you and have a ton of respect for your leadership and all you do at the 1890 Foundation. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and wisdom with us today. I enjoyed learning from you. And Alex, I don't know if there's anything else you want to say to close it out.
No, that's it. Thank you all for joining and have a couple of minutes back. All
Thank
right.
you so much to BetterMynd for hosting this conversation. I really enjoyed it. And thank you to all those who took the time out to attend. I hope I said something that resonated with you. And certainly, if you want to find me, I'm on LinkedIn. If you ever want to connect and continue this dialogue, I think it's very critical to have these conversations.